Hi, I'm Carole Robinson, and welcome to this edition of County Happenings, where we find out what's happening in the county.
That's always difficult for you.
It is. I always want, when I say county, I want to say Williamson County.
Well, you wear so many hats in this community. I mean, you just finished. I hope the people, I'm not sure when this show is going to actually air, but I hope that people will make a special effort to get the articles in the local paper, the Williamson
Herald.
You remember that name?
I do remember that.
Since that paycheck comes from them. And talking about all of their service-oriented people and service that they provide, and what
emergency and law enforcement,
what a wonderful endorsement.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, you did a great job on the articles, but just talking about how important that is to our communities, and many of those agencies that you're talking about are volunteers.
Yes, yeah. The rescue squad is a lot of the police agencies have volunteers within their agencies. Yeah, there's so many that are volunteers, and you know, I look at the time they provide for these agencies. I'm thinking, where do they find it in a day? And yet they do.
Well, we often think about it. We're so appreciative of the sheriff, Jeff Long, and his many men and women that he's got. We don't thank them enough. The same thing goes true with our municipalities, Brentwood and Franklin, and their police and fire chief organizations, and their people and the resources. And I don't know if you mentioned it in the paper, but if you live in Franklin city limits, or Franklin proper, whatever you want to call it, they have, after 1 year, they currently have the lowest ISO, that's Insurance Service Organization, rating for fire service.
Yeah,
it's a number one.
Yeah.
Now there's only 130 some of those throughout the United States.
The only way to have a zero is to have the fire station right next to your house.
That's about it. And what that's saying to the general public is, when it's all said and done, yes, safety, law enforcement, fire protection, ambulance service, but what it's really saying to the homeowner is your premiums on your house
are
reduced at the lowest level they possibly can as far as the fire.
Right.
Now, there are other factors that go into it. That's a far cry from where you live.
Sure enough is.
Where you're just hoping they can get sunlight and water back to you. But you stand an excellent chance if you're in these, particularly in Franklin and Brentwood, and this show does go to everyone, but you stand an excellent chance of having your house saved.
Yes.
That's the bottom line, besides the lowest possible insurance premium. And now all you got to do is call up the local insurance agents and say,
and it's in the residents' hands. So insurance agents are not going to automatically reduce. That's what I've found. You have to call. You have to prove that the ISO has been reduced, or whatever the ISO is. But they'll do it.
Sure. I actually live outside the city limits. I live in the unincorporated area, and where I happen to live, there's a fire hydrant within 500 feet. and the fire station is within a certain, I think it's 5 miles. But there's a lot of different factors that go into working up your homeowner premium, with brick home or frame home, fire hydrants, distance from who responds and all that. And then we have all these interlocal agreements that go together, that if you have a major fire somewhere, cities can come to counties and counties can go to cities. But you have to remember, it's all about taxation, and you can't charge Franklin residents to service unincorporated area, and that helps to hold those tax rates down. But it's an interesting journey, but the article just outlined almost every public safety discipline that I could think about.
Thank you. We try real hard, and sometimes some creep up and go, oh, we missed that one, but we try real hard.
And speaking of public servants,
yes, Memorial Day is coming up, and we always try to give thanks to our veterans, but Memorial Day is a special time because, well, it started where we gave thanks to those who served and were killed in action, and now it's just those who have served and passed away. And there's a really, this year's a special program going on.
It is. Stan Tyson.
And it's on the 30th.
The 30th. which is a Monday morning. Most places will be closed. A lot of places, not most, but a lot of places will be closed. And we encourage people to come down on Memorial Day, that Monday at 10 o'clock as the service starts. 8:30 to 9 people start filling in. The Williamson County Republican Women's are hosting, as they have done for many years, a opportunity for you to get some water and coffee, and normally Sonic has contributed food for the event, and there's normally between 400 or 500 people. So on that day, rain or shine, if it's raining like it was last year, we moved inside the archives at 5 Points. The Williamson County Band will be down there playing some songs, but it's not a celebration, but it's a memorial. It's a memorial, and if you've never been to that, or you had children that have never seen that, there'll be the bugles of taps playing. There'll be a firing squad at the end.
It's very moving, and it certainly does honor the soldiers.
And this year, as I was mentioning, Stan Tyson, almost 50 years to the date, while he was serving in Vietnam, he had a squadron, a platoon, they were pinned down. They were actually having to hold a post, and they were pinned down. And there was a dozen, 13 men that gave the ultimate sacrifice for this country. And so Stan has personally, which we're tickled to death that he has purchased bricks to lay for those gentlemen. And many of those, I think there's 6 or 7 of those family members are journeying in here from some other part. You know, a military, it's fresh on my mind so I can say it. Today I spoke at a luncheon up in Green Hills to the Revolutionary, Daughters of the Revolutionary War, and there was 50 or 75 people. And for the first time in my entire career, and I'm often asked to come and speak to a group, and it's usually about Williamson County, what's going on, county happenings, and it can be at the American Legions, it can be the Lions Club, Rotary Club, whatever. And that's normally once a week, once every 2 weeks you're going to a group. But they want to know what's happening in Williamson County, and I'm glad to do that. I look forward to every one of them. But this one, they wanted to know about Williamson County Mayor's time in Vietnam.
Wow. And you don't like talking about that. I know. I've tried to do stories.
I've never been asked to do that. So Diane, or one of the ladies in the office, booked it, and then they booked me, and then they said, well, this is what we'd like for him to talk about. And so I really thought long and hard. I said I would do it. And so in putting the speech together, I did more of a history lesson of where we were, that, you know, right after the Korean War, the Vietnam conflict really started, and it was
with the French.
And with the French, and then you got to go back in history, and many of those people in that audience were my age, and so they remembered that it was democracy versus communist, and how you and I, and Newt, he's another one in here, that would remember when you were in school having drills to get out into the hall in case the civil defense warnings went off, how to protect yourself as a child. And to many people, they had this fuzzy look on their face. They had forgot that. Or how the men at that period of time, we had a draft going on. Right. And your numbers were published. That, you know, you got to report to the recruiting station. And then, but I talked more about the history that was going on in Vietnam and the communism, and how the mindset at that particular time in our history was that communism was going to take over the whole world if the United States didn't step up and try to block it. And when I was doing the research, the reason I was telling this story, when I was doing the research of the history on that, I had forgotten that China and Russia were very good friends.
They were buddies.
They were buddies. Now, not so today.
No.
But you take a snapshot, and you look back in history, who the presidents were, the leadership were. You know, it started up under Eisenhower, who was a very successful, I think he was a 5-star general. Yeah. Then that reins was taken over by President Kennedy. Well, during all of this conflict in 62 and 63 that was going on in Vietnam, not only did they lose the leadership in Vietnam, who was really a follower and believed very strongly in Adolf Hitler, which we just finished a war 25 years ago against that kind of atrocity, that not only did that man, that president, he was overthrown, we had President Kennedy that was shot. And so that meant a whole new regime, and then that led to Johnson and all the things that occurred. So it was a time for me to reflect on history and remember some of those lessons, but I couldn't help but think, Carole, that history does repeat itself, and if we don't remember it and talk about it, so I made it a point today to talk about the history, not get down into the weeds of what I did or, you know, what other men did and how they feel about certain events. I think men, veterans in particular, they'll sit around and kick some of those cans around, but they're not going to turn it on with that conversation to the general public. And that was a period of time.
And I think, but it's also a story that needs to be told more often. With the history behind it. We know that World War II, World War I, the Korean War, we know it happened, but what we forget is all that led up to those things. How we, in Vietnam, it was, the French were fighting, but they couldn't do it alone, and we stepped in to help.
We stepped in to help. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Then the French left, and we were left, and we're there to block. We weren't there as the aggressor. Then we wound up being the aggressor. Most people will remember President Lyndon Johnson. I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat. You will remember him as the president that promoted and advanced civil rights issues to the forefront. But yet he got into a war. He
was the one who really stepped up during his administration.
His administration, through his generals and people, that he was actually, even though he'd been to Columbia, to help Columbia State. You remember his wife, that and her claim to fame, we remember in the South, is planting the flowers along the interstate to preserve that. But it was under his administration a lot of the atrocities that went on in Vietnam that eventually caused the defeat.
It became a political war rather than a...
And you had all the things going on back home. When I say back home, away from Vietnam, that the country was being divided by a war. Some thought we were there, and some thought we didn't need to be there.
And we weren't fighting to win.
We weren't fighting to win, and I kept thinking, here we are in History Lesson 2016, in so many of the things we do. Some of them I understand are political in nature, some of them are economic in nature, some of those are positioning and different philosophies, but history needs to be told and remembered so that we don't make those same mistakes. Because as I closed in the speech, and I'll say it here, there's never been a war that's good.
No. But there will always be war.
And so what you're honoring on Memorial Day are these men, and often they were just men like myself that came from the other side of the tracks. Their parents worked, my parents worked shift work. I was not an enlisted man. I mean, I was not an officer. I was an enlisted man, and you followed orders. And it was real easy for me to go into service. I didn't particularly say I wanted to go in, but once you
if you hadn't been drafted, you probably wouldn't have gone.
I don't know. That was something that was preached that you needed to do that, but it didn't matter. And so I joined the Air Force. But getting into the military and going through basic and putting hospital corners on your beds and putting it tight as it can be.
You learned a lot.
That wasn't any. You learned to follow orders, and where I was going with this conversation, I was kind of raised that way with a mom. There wasn't a lot of democracy at my house. Whatever she cooked, if you didn't want to eat it, that's fine. The next meal would be whenever it was. And
Sounds
yes,
familiar.
you had to do work, and you had to do these things in life.
And if you didn't, there was
ramifications. There were consequences, but my mom died a couple of years ago, and there was no one that I cherished anymore. And the teachings and the beliefs and the training she put me and prepared you for. And I think most of us as boys, I hope you feel that way about your mama and your daddy, but I had the best mom and dad a man could ever have. But it was not a big chore for me. In fact, I'll make this comment. That's not why you're on here. It's not happening in Williamson County, but I'll tell it anyway. when I first went into the military, and the very first one or two breakfasts we had, toast came through this big machine. You just load the bread on one end, and it just rolled it over. I didn't know toast came without it being burnt. my whole life, growing up at home, I can still see Mom scraping that off in the sink. It was always burnt, and it had that burnt taste. Well, you learned to like that.
Yeah.
And so they were cooking this toast. It wasn't hard. And I thought, well, this isn't toast. But you learn to adjust
This is
to
just
it.
warm bread.
Yeah.
Well, like my husband always said, he doesn't regret ever going into the military.
I would do it again, but there's no war
It's good.
that's ever good.
No. So anyway, we will be having Memorial Day on May 30th, starting at 10 o'clock.
About an hour show.
About an hour, and
Rain or shine.
and rain or shine, and then you can enjoy the rest of the day with your family.
That's right.
But remember those who served and gave all. And as we're remembering things, the public safety building that
Up and going, very successful, ribbon cutting and touring. I guess we had 400 or 500 people. I know the TV crew, Channel 3 here, was out there, took a lot of photos. I know that's been replayed probably several times. But it's one of those...
it's a nice little bunker.
It is, and it's one of those facilities that I hope we never have to use.
Yeah.
We will use it every day. I was talking to Mac Purdy, and almost every day the sheriff's using it for training. Mac's using it. Outside groups are using it. We've got good training room, good facilities, high-tech technology there, that we can actually have a place for our law enforcement and our public safety men and women to train and practice. And hopefully we'll never have another flood like we did 6 years ago. But if we do, we'll be better prepared for it, for all the different disciplines.
Even the floods and the tornadoes that go through, and there's so many events that could happen that we hope don't. But from just talking to Mac and talking to you and talking to Sheriff Long, it just sounds like that building is prepared for that you've looked deeply into what could possibly happen and prepared for it.
A lot of time and research and energy went into that, and I'm sure people watching say, well, how does that help me? It helps us to be able to coordinate those activities, those agencies, in the event we need to get to you. And ambulances can be better coordinated. Just recently, we've pulled the 911 centers. We've got one in the county that was here at this administration building. It will be relocating out there, and Franklin, their 911 center, both agencies, both city and Williamson County government, have voted to put those together, so there'll be some cost savings in that. But the big
continuity.
And the continuity. But the big thing is when you call in with a 911 call, you don't have to go through a couple of different areas, which is always the chance of a dropped call. And that's the biggest fear 911 centers have, is that you're calling in from one particular area and it's got to be transferred to another area. And I know that's on the news just recently, I saw that. But for us, it works best that we've got one person or people in a general area handling that for the dispatch of fire or police or law or ambulance, or just to handle your individual emergency you may have at your home, that we can have trained, certified men and women that are all speaking on the same page, that can better take care of our service needs that we have in our community.
Well, and the big thing that is so important is that there's one place where all that is, that all these agencies can converge on in an emergency, and everybody's working together, and everybody's on the same page. Or in past, and that's what you've learned through past emergencies.
Well, and I think all of us remember 9/11 that occurred at the top part of this century in New York and Pennsylvania, throughout all of the country. We had many different agencies that have different frequencies of their communication. Now this new public safety building won't take care of that, but what we did do simultaneously, we're in the second year of funding, is to combine Brentwood and Franklin and Williamson County, so that law enforcement, our fire people, all of us can be on the same frequency and talk with the same same radios, and instead of each one of us buying our own separate
Right.
systems, because we learned during 9/11 in New York taught us all that the police couldn't talk with the other, one borough couldn't talk to another borough across the town. Well, we had that same issue.
Well, yeah, during the flood, the cell towers were down, and so if you can't talk on your radios, you can't use your cell phones. How do you communicate?
And technology has helped us improve our situation here and all across this country. But you have to have some place where all that can be funneled in. I don't know how many miles of cable and wiring are in that building, and I mean miles. But we've got backup data storage now for what we call redundancy power, from the school records to government records to hospital records. We have the ability now that Middle Tennessee Electric, who the vast majority of people have that service here in Williamson County, if their station or if their mainframe in Murfreesboro goes out, they contributed to this public safety building so that they could have a place at the table to run their grid when the electricity's out. And that can be done with a flip of a switch. TEMA, which is all from TEMA and FEMA, which is Tennessee Emergency Management and Federal Emergency Management. That's all from the Armory Drive off I-65 there. There's always that possibility that something could happen. Well, where's their backup? Their backup now can be in our facility because they help pay for some of the technology, the boards, the grids. We get to use it 365 days out of the year. But it's when that one event that may occur or they need backup, then they can come down and have it seated at the table. So what we've actually done is put the olive branch out there and encourage the Middle Tennessee Electrics and those other agencies, whether it's in the hospital the same way, that if your facility goes down, then let's all work together and still keep this going on a grid map for our community's needs. Just in the last 2 or 3 days, we've had this very significant rainfall in Sumner County and up towards Red Boiling Springs, all up in that Hartsville area. The water is one thing. The rescue is a whole total different thing, but you've got to be able to communicate to those guys where that's at. And oftentimes, as you said, during heavy rains and wind storms, that those systems are blown out because they're not protected. We do have ways now, and in the final step of this, we were able to integrate through all volunteers our Williamson County ham operators. We call them We Cares. I don't know what that stands for, but it's ham operators. And these are the men and women that operate those systems on a volunteer basis. We put money into them, but they can literally operate with no electricity.
Isn't that amazing? Oh my gosh.
We've got the backup generators if we need it for our systems, but those systems are good for about 24 hours. We can run. If all electricity's down, we can still run it off from generators. It's a self-contained unit. I would hope we'd never have to shut this county would be down to that point because we have looping of power throughout Middle Tennessee Electric, and we have looping of power in our facility. But what if? And that's what Mac Purdy and Bill Jorgensen and the sheriff have to deal with. It's that what if. And we have a group of men and women, boys and I think the youngest is 12 or 14, that can literally, we have the lines, we can run them up in a different place. We can get somebody here at the complex. We can transmit out through ham operators.
They use radio waves?
They use radio, OSOS.
The OS,
If you've been in the military, you know. When I was a boy growing up in the military, to communicate back home, it wasn't using your cell phone. It was using landlines and tying in, and we have that capability out there. And what's so amazing with the technology that's out there and is available today, no power, no nothing, and we can still send an email through shortwave now.
Wow.
Now that's technology beyond my wildest dreams how that works, but that's security, and people ought to feel fortunate enough to live in a county that there are men and women out there that are, and you have got county commissioners that have funded this to say we want a safe, secure community let Washington take care of the national defense, but all of us have to take care of our own
Right,
turf.
right, and that's the way it should be. But boy, that's a lot of forward thinking, a lot of, like you said, what ifs and contingency plans for contingency plans, and that's a lot of thinking. Goes beyond what I'm capable of doing, I think. And we just touched briefly on the growth in the budget. The budget, July is coming quickly.
True. Each year in July, we start at 9 o'clock. We have to wrap up. The county commissioners have to wrap up. There's 24 men and women that have to vote on the budget. This year's school budget should be absolutely no surprise to anyone because of the continued growth we've got here. We're expecting 800 more children this next year than we had this year. That's after all graduations and everything. And those new children come to town require more teachers. We are opening 3 new schools, all in Nolensville this time. High school and an elementary in the middle, and they're doing the elementary in the middle as a K-8. But 3 more schools out in that area, and each one of those schools, once you put the key in the door, turn it, put it in the lock, and open the door, you got to have teachers in there. You got to have
Books, you got to
have all of those things. So the budget is up for the schools, but it's still a percentage. You know, for the last, I guess, 15 or 20 years, we've kind of held that budget to 62% of the total budget. So most of your tax dollars are going back into public education. The other part is paying off the buildings and the school buildings, the public safety building, and the vehicles. As we have more people, you got to have more law enforcement. The sheriff needs more things.
And a little bit for salaries.
Well, a little bit for salaries. Yeah, we are proposing this year a 4% pay raise for all of the school employees and all county general employees. I never back off from paying our employees. I always think that's a good thing. And we're competing with the free market out there. Right. Sometimes that's hard. But we've got great employees in Williamson County and that are dedicated people to seeing the thing gets done. So we'll see how all that goes in July. I know we'll meet a couple of more times. We can get a little bit more definitive on that and where we are. But it's always interesting in Williamson County at budget time.
It certainly is. And don't forget Memorial Day, May 30th. That's a Monday, 10 o'clock in the morning at 5 Points.
And bring your lawn chairs.
Bring your lawn chairs. Bring something, or a blanket or something to sit on. Meet at the Archives building if you want to come a little early and
enjoy some coffee and fellowship and get to know these men.
Get to know these men and women who served in our military, because a lot of them show up, and it's just an honor to see them. And I'll see you next time.
Rain Again by Gail Bunton Haddock. It's green again now that the rain has come back. I've been out in it. My feet are wet and getting cold, but no matter. The land was parched, the leaves brittle dry with fire and ever-present threat. With the rain has come a hush. It has settled on the far hills and across the fields. We were ready for the relief of this rain. Sometimes slow and soft, sometimes hard and slanting on a rush of wind, and then a quietness that heals the brutality of a too long drought.